This is Doug Odell, the bass player from the band Ice Age, and you are watching the Case for Bass podcast. Keep it low.
So what's happening today, Greg?
Well, today we have a special guest.
Okay.
Of course, all our guests are special.
Yeah.
And today we have Doug Odell. And Doug is the bass player in a band called Ice Age. And we always recommend check them out on YouTube, on Facebook. They're a fantastic prog rock band. They have a new sound with a lot of classic rock background in it. And it's fantastic once you hear it. They don't care about 3-minute songs. They really let it rip. And if you like, old style classic rock, they bring a real new twist to it. And we want to welcome Doug, and I want to just pass it back to Anthony for the first question.
There we go. And first and foremost, a big round of applause and welcome for Doug Odell, bass player, backing vocalist, an all-around cool dude. If you notice, I changed the title to the band Ice Age.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Awesome, dude. So I always ask this. Did you choose the bass or did the bass choose you? And why?
I absolutely chose the bass, and I'll tell you what happened. There was a thrift shop in Yonkers, New York, where I grew up, that had a Hofner copy in the window. It was $40. Nice. And it was a right-handed instrument, although I'm a lefty. And I didn't know what I was doing. I was taking piano lessons at the time. I didn't know anything about bass.
Wait, I'm gonna give you a shout out and intro every second because I'm jealous of lefty players. Big shouts to the lefty players out there. The Paul McCartneys of the world.
I just want to say I'm a lefty, but not a lefty player.
Yep.
That's interesting, and I have a couple of funny things to say about that.
Okay, as you may continue.
Yeah. So I got this right-handed Hofner copy and did not know what to do with it. Even though I was studying music and taking piano lessons, I didn't understand what the bass did in music. I didn't understand what a bass line was or what the bass parts were. So I picked this thing up. And when I picked it up, it naturally felt like I should be holding it like this, holding it like a lefty.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's what felt natural to me.
Okay.
And the first thing I did was I was a huge Beatles freak then and now. And I tried to pick out the vocal melody of She Loves You on the G string.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Like I didn't understand positioning, or I had no idea what I was doing. So here I was trying to play the vocal melody of She Loves You on the G string, clueless, completely clueless. And then I focused more on keyboards for a long time, and playing in bands and trying to get bands together. And I just kept coming back to bass. And in my middle school orchestra, they needed a bass player. And I wasn't, still was not with it. And I wanted to play piano, and they didn't need a piano player. So the band director said, "How about tuba?" And I said, "Absolutely not. No, thank you." I just didn't want to carry that thing and also get my ass kicked for being a tuba player. So anyway, I had this 2.5 octave Moog synthesizer that was a co-op between Moog and Radio Shack.
Okay.
It was an analog synth. So I said
Wow.
to the band director, what if I play keyboard bass on this mode?
Hmm.
And he was like, okay. So I became the keyboard bass player in the orchestra.
Whoa, nice.
That's
That's
unusual.
what made me fall
That
in
is very
love.
unusual.
That's
Yeah.
unusual.
That's how I
Wow.
fell in love with bass, as far as understanding the role of the instrument in music. And here I was playing left-hand keyboard bass, and ultimately that led me to, okay, I need to get serious about this. I need a left-handed bass. I need a teacher. Like, I need to get real.
And this is something that you discovered when you were young.
Yeah.
Good for you, dude. Now, I'm going to jump around a little bit because you're in a prog rock band now, and then you started playing keyboards. So you had a keyboard synth. Did that kind of connect the prog rock thing for you together? I mean, because I'm hearing I'm in my head. I'm just hearing the from the trees from Rush.
Yes.
You
So,
know,
like at the time, I'll just give you a sense of where my head was at. So, it was all about the Beatles and Kiss at first. I was obsessed with Kiss at the age of like 7 and 8, and I actually saw them. I was 9 years old, 1979 Dynasty tour.
same concert. I
That's
went. That was my very first show. So I went as Star Child.
oh wow, that's amazing.
Yep. Oh yeah.
And then when I discovered the Beatles, I decided at that moment, well, Kiss are not musical enough. Their songs are not special enough, and I was obsessed with the Beatles.
Okay.
As far as the keyboard piece of things goes, I went through this obsession with the Doors and Ray Manzarek, and I was trying to master being able to play "Light My Fire."
Okay.
And the coordination required between that left-handed bass part and everything that was happening with the right hand.
That's true.
And then when Van Halen started doing keyboard-centric stuff,
Mhm.
then I was all about, I want to learn how to play all of Eddie's keyboard stuff, because one thing that was cool about Eddie as a keyboard player is he had a very heavy left hand doing cool bass parts,
That's true.
to accompany what he was doing with the right hand. So my introduction to prog, and it's funny that you mentioned The Trees by Rush, was Exit Stage Left.
There it is.
Great album. Just
Great album.
game changer.
That album was a total game changer.
I didn't believe that it was a live record. Because in my, to my young ears, nobody can be this good live. And it just blew the doors off everything for me.
Wow. Nice.
And I just wanted to be complete. I just wanted to be, I was like, I'm going to play keyboards and bass in a band, and I want to be Geddy Lee.
Nice.
I hear you.
Did you get to the point where, since you mentioned that you want to be Geddy Lee, did you get to the point where you actually started doing the playing bass parts as well as using the foot pedals?
I
Did you
never
ever get to that point?
I never got Taurus pedals, but I remember I was playing.
You want to buy a set? Just kidding. I got one.
I remember playing in a cover band, and sometimes I would do something where, I'll give you an example. Like, was in a cover band, and we were playing "Here I Go Again" by Whitesnake.
Sure.
And in the verses, I was actually like tapping the G on the verses with my left hand and playing the right hand on keys. So I was trying to do stuff in that coordinated fashion, playing keys and bass.
Oh, very cool. Speaking of that, let's take it back to when you got the Hofner copy, and you're now in it. Your teacher wants you to play tuba. You're like, absolutely not. Playing tuba will get my ass murdered by anyone, because it's just simply not a cool instrument. I don't care what anyone says. And
universally uncool.
Yeah, exactly. And then you have the ability to play keyboards as well. When did you know that at some point in your life you wanted to do this? Like, what was it like? You got the Hofner copy, but when did you know at some point in your life, or what bass was it that you grabbed onto? You said, I'm really enjoying this instrument. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life. What was that point in your life?
Uh, well, the first lefty bass that I got that was a proper left-handed instrument was an Area Pro 2.
Ooh, nice
Uh,
bass.
it was a nice, really nice bass. I
Nice
destroyed
bass.
it because
Mm.
my first bass teacher, Greg Filene, who was introduced to me by another one of your guests, Rob Macucci, who's also
Yes,
like
we
me.
love Rob.
we love
Shout out
Rob.
to
Rob's
Rob.
awesome.
Rob.
Yeah. Rob, just go Rob Macucci for me.
Rob's teacher, who became mine, Greg Filene, his idea was, I don't want you to just learn how to play bass. I want you to know how to set up a bass. I want you to know how to do truss rod adjustments and bridge adjustments. And I was not interested at all in any of that. Like, forget all that. I'm not good at that. I don't want to do that. I want to learn bass. But he tried. He still spent time on that. So I destroyed my Area Pro 2 bass, messing with the truss rod. Like I wrecked it. I
Oh
completely.
wow, okay.
But that bass, which was my first real serious instrument that I did my 10,000 hours on, that was the light bulb moment for me of I'm a bass player. I don't care about keyboards anymore. This is all I care about. I'm obsessed. Like, this is my world.
Wow.
I hear you,
as
man. It's a great story.
Yep. As far as influences go, you mentioned the Beatles. Obviously, you mentioned prog rock bands. What else do you listen to?
I mean, I'll give you a smattering of a few bass players that have inspired me. I mean, the list is endless.
Okay.
But like Paul S. Denman from Sade
Really?
is a guy that does not get enough love and doesn't get talked about. But like, think about those bass lines and how integral they are to the grooves in those songs.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that. I was watching Nothing Comes Between Us, and there was a part where he goes, and I was watching it. I just turned it really loud. I was like, "Damn, it's so hypnotic. It just hypnotizes you because it just kind of lulls you into this groove." And I was like, and I didn't get his name, but now that you mentioned his name, pretty impressive.
One of the things we talk about is we talk about bass players where we as Anthony would say, the guy, as you suggested, the guy from Sade, and you never know who these people are. And one of the things we talk about is how the bass player is the victim of being underproduced, expressed. And it's great because you do that deep dive into who's the bass player from what band and pulling out these nuggets that really put them into what's the word I'm thinking of, an eternal status of bass greatness.
That is so beautifully stated, Greg, and I couldn't agree more. Another guy that comes to mind in a big way is Stuart Zender, the original bassist from Jamiroquai.
Yeah, don't get Anthony started.
I'm a huge Jamiroquai fan.
Don't get Anthony started.
Because I used to work with Day and Dan Bennett and Dave Kowalski over at Hillside Sound Recording, which eventually became Bennett Studios. And Danny Bennett managed Jamiroquai. And Dave Kowalski, they hated Jamiroquai. And I remember hearing the music. I heard the initial music when this is back in early 80s. I mean, late 80s, actually. And I'm like, this is great. But for some odd reason, they did not like him. And Stuart Zander was like the man.
When they were coming up and when they got big, I remember the big comparison, and it's an unavoidable comparison, was they were saying, oh, this is a ripoff of Stevie Wonder.
Yes.
I understand why vocally you would say that. And obviously what they did musically, borrowed heavily from R&B, from funk, from soul, from acid jazz, from rock, all of that. But, you know, if you look at those bass lines that he wrote, I mean, again, that music without him and without those bass parts would not have been anywhere near as special. And
No, absolutely not.
it was incredible. I mean,
Yes.
those bass parts were the sub hooks going on in that stuff. It was nuts. And,
No, I love this stuff in that way. It was great.
and you know, nothing against what they did after he left, but they were never the same. The band never reached the levels of musicality that they had when he was gone from the band.
Yes, he had physical fist fights with Jamiroquai. Like he literally would fight. Like they would literally have fights, and you're like, man, like what's going on with that band where the bass player has to once in a while punch the singer in the mouth?
The one thing that I thought was interesting about J.K. is because he doesn't have any musical training, he doesn't play any instruments. He would sing the parts. He would go to members of the band. And he would sing what he wanted a part to be in order to convey it to them, which, you know, I thought was pretty cool.
Wow. Okay, who else do you like? You seem to have a bunch of. You got these.
Well, I mean,
you went from Beatles, prog rock, Rush to Desmond, from Sade, and to Jamiroquai. So obviously, you have a pretty good variety of genres of music.
Well, you know, Jocko. When I got introduced to Jocko,
hold on a second.
Wait a second.
We're not worthy. We're not worthy. We're not worthy.
We're not worthy.
Okay, we're back.
When I met my second bass teacher, Steve Fix, the first day he said to me, "Tell me some bass players that you admire." And of course, at the time, I was all about shred and flash. So it was like, well, I really like Billy Sheehan, and you know, I'm mentioning.
Oh wait.
Hold on a second. Billy Sheehan.
You mentioned Billy Sheehan.
Billy, we love
Billy,
you.
We're not worthy.
Love you.
We're not worthy. We love you, Billy. All right, and back to you, Doug.
And he said to me, "Well, what do you think about Tom Hamilton from Aerosmith?" And I said, "Well, he's okay." Now, once I started digging into Tom's playing and his bass parts, I had a whole new respect for him. You know, just like doing a deep dive analysis into the nuances of the way he plays and writes. You know, and so suddenly, you know, there were guys out there. I mean, I'm one of the biggest King's X fans you're ever going to meet.
Yeah, you nailed it. You're nailing it.
We're not worthy.
We love you, dude.
We love you, Doug. Yes.
Doug Pinnick, okay, is 1 in a million. And, you know, a guy that doesn't get enough credit for being an incredible bass player, who I also love, is Prince.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Prince is so good.
Incredible bass player.
Yep.
I mean, he's in every instrument that he touches, it's magic. But people don't realize, you know, that, you know, like, look at the Madhouse records, right? Like, if you guys look at the Madhouse records, I'm pretty sure Prince played drums.
He did play drums on Madhouse records, yeah.
I mean, there's nothing that the guy couldn't do. So, you know, it's definitely all over the map for me as far as players go. I mean, like Cliff Burton, the bass in Metallica.
Definitely all over.
Awesome.
I remember learning Anesthesia Pulling Teeth note by note and just like studying it and playing it over and over and over 1,000 times, just like to get it perfect.
Nice.
And
So cool. All right, so you mentioned actually, you know something I'm tired of. I'm hogging up this.
I was waiting for this.
I'm hogging for this space here. Let Greg, what's going on in your head right now? What questions do you want to ask? Yes.
Okay. Well, I hear all the music that you're dissecting and you're learning, and what's the music even before you were playing that you were listening to? What was imprinted upon you, maybe from your parents or your friends, or you were in school, because sometimes there's a difference between I really like listening to this and I have to play this kind of music.
There is. That's a big difference.
Well, I'll tell you something. My father introduced me to Disraeli Gears by Cream.
There you go.
There you go.
There you go. Jack Bruce, man.
That's right.
Rest in peace.
Another round of applause. Rest in peace, Jack Bruce.
Blew my mind. Like, what the hell is going on? Like, with this band, and it's funny because power trios as a concept, like, are something that I always gravitated to, like ZZ Top. The first few ZZ Top records that I heard, everyone kind of became aware of who they were when they leaned over to the pop side of things, like with the Eliminator album and beyond. But those early records where it was straight up blues rock, that blew my mind. Johnny Winter was another thing that I got introduced to as a young guy, and I just gravitated to his playing. And I saw him live. Saw him at Pier 84. It's funny.
Oh wow, those were great concerts. Those
in
were great
1987,
concerts.
Like on one night, I see Johnny Winter, playing with a trio. Comes out, the first 6 minutes of the song, he's just wailing. Before he even goes up to the vocal mic. And then the next night after that, it was Whitesnake and Motley Crue in Madison Square Garden.
Wow.
That's cool.
Wow. Yeah, because it's Anthony talks about, and I agree, about how the music you get imprinted with somehow it seeps out when you're down the road and least expect it.
Yep.
And when you talk about Cream and the power trios and Rush, it's especially with the keyboard based stuff. I've been in three-piece bands for, I'm going to say, decades now, and I always think of it, it's like Flight of the Bumblebee. It's like on paper this thing should never work.
Yep.
And yet the gaps that open up, the possibilities that occur, the magic that happens when you're in, generally a three-piece band is something that when you break into bigger bands, sometimes you're not as input savvy as opposed to having all this room and letting it rip. And I know in Ice Age you've got a lot of talented players that can fill the gap. And how do you work with the keyboard player who's also the lead singer, which there's so many heavy presences in the sounds that are coming out of that band. And it's amazing how you can make that work.
Well, it was definitely a learning and growth opportunity for me, because first of all, when I joined the band, which was in 2001, their level of musicianship, like, I really had to up my game. Anything I had ever done up until that point, just to be able to keep up with them. These guys, they're
now, was that something that was verbalized? Did they say to you, step up, or did you more or less do it yourself?
No, it was on me. Okay. It was on me to step up. Like, I had to prove it to myself and I auditioned and I got the gig on the spot.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Thank goodness.
That is awesome.
But then,
as bass players should.
Yes.
But to continue to keep up with them and also find my place in the band, because it's one thing when you join an established band and they had a couple of records out. So what's your job? Your job is learn the bass parts on the records. But now, when you're thrown into a situation where you're immediately writing new music with these guys, now you have to step up in the context of you've got to write something that's going to fit. And when you have a band like Ice Age, where all of the players, and it's because it's Prague, it's busy. So how do I come up with something that's not going to step on the vocal, that's going to complement what's happening rhythmically, like you said, the keyboard player, and Josh has also a very active left hand, and he writes great bass parts
Okay.
as well. So it's
Sure.
you want to be able to work
Cooperate.
with that.
Yeah.
Be cooperative. Not
It also sounds like you want to have your own identity as well. Like the fact that you said he writes great bass parts is complimentary to him, but at the same time, you're the bass player, and also thinking from a songwriter's perspective, it's like that's cool, dude. But I want to add in my flavor as well.
And you got to coordinate that with the drummer.
Yes, absolutely.
What I was lucky about, and what I continue to be lucky about with Ice Age, is they always let me be myself, and they encourage me to write my own parts. And I'd come up with something, and they would give me that feedback, and they would, and sometimes it would be a thing where I wasn't sure what to do with a particular part or song, and I'd give them a few different options. I'd say, what do you think of this? I'll try that. I'd present them with different iterations of a bass line, and then let them guide me. If it was something where I wasn't naturally feeling it and I needed that. And then they would say, lean into this or try that or combine these two things.
Okay.
And so there's just so much mutual respect and admiration, and there's no egos in Ice Age where you get nourished.
I'm going to give you a big congratulations for that, because most bands don't have that. Yeah, most bands, especially when the bass player, because the bass player tends to come in. I find that for most people I know who play bass, their experience, especially when they're new in the band. Think about how Metallica treated all the bass players after Cliff Burton passed away. I mean, they just treated them like crap. And I've heard that from several bands. I came from a band that I would outshine the singer, and the drummer didn't like that, and it was like, all right, goodbye. It's like, but the fact that you're in a band where they appreciate you, and again, there's no egos. That's a rarity. That really,
I'm gonna
is a
quote
rarity.
Steven Tyler, and this is somewhere on the internet probably a million times, but he goes, "There's no democracy in a rock band." And that's the way him and Joe Perry, manhandled Aerosmith. And you never really hear the stories, from Hamilton or Joey Kramer and who's that, Whitford, Fred Whitford, and how they made it work was, I guess, essentially a follow the leader. And we love the way Tom Hamilton plays. I'm a huge fan. And it was like the Love in the Elevator. It was that when they really went into a more modern sound, and he went into a drop D.
Yes.
And it really opened the door for not only me getting a hip shot, but just how he worked within the construct to be cooperative.
Yep.
And it takes a lot of credit and, a lot of maturity to be in a band with so many pieces, with so many parts.
Yes.
As you're in.
And Tom, doesn't get enough credit. If you look at the body of work and how melodic and tasty and thoughtful he is.
Sure.
As far as I'm concerned, the bass part in Sweet Emotion goes down.
Yeah, the whole time, and I mean, it's in my wheelhouse, so I dig deep on that. Thank you for mentioning it.
What he plays in the verses, like a lot, I've never seen anyone play it correctly, and the only reason I can play it correctly is because my second bass teacher made me do a deep dive, and just like the slides and the octaves in the verses.
Yes. Yet it's all simple, but it's all rhythmically inserted. Yep. There's you have to break the time of what you're hearing to actually complement the part he's playing.
Absolutely, and it's almost percussive in a lot of ways when he's doing it. When you listen to those parts,
it's heavy on the kick.
Yes.
It's real heavy.
And then in the last verse of that song, where he breaks away from that part and follows the guitar more. I just love the variety of, okay, in this verse, I'm going to do it a little different. And it almost feels like something that probably us bass players will appreciate and notice, and no one else probably will.
That's true. Well, look as bass players, we're gonna go for the obvious. We're gonna listen to the parts that really hit home, and at the same time, the bass players who have a better ear will go for the subtleties. It's a lot of times it's the nuances that work. It's funny because one of my friends, he would play these notes, and I would always say to him, "You're playing them too hard. Stop doing thump 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 thump. You got to give yourself some ghost notes just to give it a groove. Otherwise, it sounds too stiff. Even if you're doing something like "I'll sunshine of sunshine of your love." Dun, 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 dun. I go 1 2 dun, 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 dun. It's something that catches people off guard because they'll hear it. They won't notice it right away, but they'll come up to me later and go, "You made that shit sound so fucking groovy between you and the drummer." And it was all the nuances, just the small little things that you throw in there without losing track of the essence of the song.
You got to hold the bottom. You got to hold the bottom.
Yes, you got to hold the bottom. That's the most important.
That's the first priority, and a lot of times, I don't know if this is a Jocko-ism or something I had picked up from Alfonso Johnson at his clinic. Is you basically have three choices. You have the harmony, the rhythm, or the melody. And you gotta literally pick your poison and go for it. And whether you're gonna lock on the rhythm, whether you're gonna basically ride the rhythm of the rhythm guitar and keep that space open, you're gonna be in like a unison form, or you're gonna go for the melody. And to do all three at once is a tough trick. Let's put it that way. And that eventually you find your lane. And I'm going to repeat myself again. You're sometimes at the victim of the producer for what lane you're put into. So
that's absolutely true.
And it's ironic is when we talk about bands and the bass players. I don't know if I'm going to cross a line here, but the two things we talk about is nobody really ever picked up a bass and said, "I want to play like Nikki Sixx."
That's right.
And Nikki, if you're out there, I apologize. You're welcome to come on and challenge us on that.
Well, Nikki Sixx and the bass player from Uriah Heep.
Well, the original one. The new one, Dave Rimmer, is an absolute monster. Yep. And he just did an album with Richie Faulkner with another band in between the new Priest record.
Is that Elegant Weapons?
Yes.
Yes, you did.
I believe so. Incredible. And I'll cross a line again. And maybe you can answer this for me, Doug, did you pick up a bass and said, "I want to play like Gene Simmons"?
Well, honestly, at the beginning, yes. And I want to say a couple of things. First of all,
wait. Let me interrupt you for a second.
I know I'm going to get beaten down for this for every rock and roll mega legend in the world.
I'm laughing at it because you did mention that you were a Kiss fan, and that you mentioned that the Beatles. And I was trying to say to myself, how the hell do you put them in the same category? Like you put the Beatles and Kiss. Besides having four members in the band, that's the only thing that they have in common to me. It's like how'd you do that? And then Greg, here you are later in the interview, you asked that question, so you can actually answer.
Well, like I said to Doug before we started, I'm a listener, and I'm going to answer Anthony's question in the conversation that we had. One of the reasons this show and podcast formed is Anthony and I, after reconnecting after a bunch of decades, we would talk on the phone for hours. Still do, about bass, about music, about players, about whys, about wheres, about hows.
Yep.
And one of I'm going to say one of my superpowers is that I can overstate the obvious.
Yep.
And the connection between the Kiss and the Beatles is this 1-4-5 AB formula of music that eventually you have these parts and eventually you have to connect the parts. But yet
True.
Judas Priest and Mariah Carey and Dolly Parton can all be on the same page because they all understand the parts and the changes, and the keys don't vary that much, but the tones and the inspirations are 180 degrees apart from each other.
Yep, true indeed.
Well, one thing I have to say about Kiss, as far as like the Beatle connection, is I do know that when Gene and Paul were conceptualizing what Kiss was meant to be, they did look to the Beatles in the spirit of this having 4 unique individuals that would all get a turn at lead vocal. And so they did take that inspiration from the Beatles, and they did want to have songs for Ace and Peter to sing and encourage him to do so. So there was that. But I think Gene doesn't get enough credit for writing some very cool melodic bass parts. Like, I don't know if you know the song Sure Know Something.
Yes.
Okay, tell me that's not a cool bass line.
It is a cool bass line. I hate that. Yes.
Gene Simmons was mentioned. This is the episode of me going on a limb. I got back into watching Davey 504 on YouTube, and he talks about Gene Simmons playing some incredible riffs. And the parts that he wrote, the song he pulled out was Detroit Rock City.
Of course.
And he's playing the part to it, and he's talking about how this riff is da 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 da, how it's incredibly intricate with a pick.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm, you're just staring in awe that not only is he dissecting a Kiss song, but he's talking about why this riff is not only difficult to perform, but unique in its own right. And, Gene Simmons is always one of those bass players in my book that you always want to respect him, and you always want to fear him because he pulled something out. He's not just a thumper and a thudder. And,
no,
maybe that's just part of the act.
Absolutely.
Because where like you talk about the Beatles, where they're each individuals, Kiss definitely did that, but in a very unified form.
And McCartney, needs to get mentioned as, an obvious influence because, take a song like Something.
Yes.
If you do an analysis of the bass part on that song, it's just incredible. It's to be that melodic, but not step on the vocals.
Not step on the vocals. Yep.
Especially if it's not your song.
Right.
It's true.
Because that's a George Harrison song, and I'm gonna go into an inversion of it, talking about how Nathan East performs it with George Harrison. The Made in Japan album is just one of the greatest recordings as a bass player you could ever hear, because it isn't just George Harrison with his hits. He's got Eric Clapton and his band, and just the level of expression is completely inspiring. At least it was for me. It was the record I couldn't shut off. I didn't even want to play with it. That I just had it in my car. It was on from beginning to end, and you're listening to Nathan East. Forget about all the recordings and artists he performed with. How he's taking that one song and he's taking what Paul did and completely re-expressing it into another level.
Absolutely.
So, thank you.
All right, guys. It is now the time, and Greg,
this is my favorite part.
This is the best part, Greg. What are we going to do next?
Okay, we're going to ask you, we're sure you have a forest of weapons, and we see there's one in your hand, looks like a Fender, and if you could tell us about your top 3 go-to basses.
Okay.
And they don't have to be in order,
nope.
But if you take the one that doesn't get the grab to the one that sometimes gets the grab, to the one that's your mainstay, this is my baby bass. We would love to hear about each of them.
So definitely this 5-string Euro Spectre is. I call this one Junior because before I ever had kids, this was my first child. This bass.
Nice.
When I joined Ice Age, I had never played a 5-string.
Okay.
To me, that was a mountain I wasn't ready to climb. But it was a requirement of being in that band because they were writing stuff that required that extended range.
Okay.
And their bass player, who also happened to be a lefty that I was replacing,
That's unique.
His name is Aaron DeCesar. He's a great bass player, a Long Island guy, and he was playing 5-string, so he wrote parts that required it. But this bass has been everywhere with me. It's just an incredible instrument. Interestingly enough, they hadn't even really done that many lefties at the time, so that there's something about the design of the bridge, which I've never seen in any other bass except for Spectre, where the only thing that holds each bridge saddle where it is a set screw on this opposite side. And because of the lefty configuration, that screw that they had done is absolutely useless. There's nothing for it to touch. So my tech, a guy named John Birchie, who is just a guru, an amazing guy, he had to custom make his own set screw on the opposite side because, just to adapt to the lefty thing.
Wow.
And that set screw squishes all of those saddles together and holds them in place.
Now, now before you ended up with that model, were there other models that you tried first, other brands?
As far as basses along the way?
Yes.
Sure. So like I said, I after the Hofner copy, I had a K bass, K-A-Y.
Well, I'm asking in reference to the 5-string.
Oh, no, I never touched a 5-string before this bass.
Okay, so that was your first one.
Never even picked one up.
Wow.
Because as a lefty, how many music stores can you walk into and say, all right, let me try that 5-string on the wall? You're lucky if there's 1 or 2 4-strings in the whole joint.
Wow.
So, like, literally the first time I ever picked up a 5-string bass was this. And it took me a while to adapt, first of all, to the spacing.
Sure.
And then just to wrap my head around what can I do with this low B now?
Yeah.
Like, what possibilities do I have positionally that I didn't have before?
Yeah. How long do you think it took before you got comfortable with it?
I would say it took a few years.
Really, that long?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
Were you looking down and going, "Oh, that's not the E"?
Oh, all the time.
Okay.
All the time.
Okay.
Yeah, like it really took me a while. And then what I ultimately developed over time was an ability to flip a switch in my brain about am I on a 4 or am I on a 5? And now I can flip that switch.
Okay, awesome.
But that did not come easily. That took a lot of work.
It literally took me a very short period of time to get used to it. I just found that I ended up liking a 4-string. I just went back to the 4. I just felt good. I got used to the 6-string, but I found that there was no application for it. I was playing mostly rock bands. Yeah, I bring the 6-string along, and I'm still with the normal 4. And every once in a while I would do these chords, and everyone would look and go, "What the fuck was that?" Like, why did you bother wasting your time? And with 5-strings, I find that, like, you're in a prog rock band, 5-strings in prog they're a marriage in heaven. They're a marriage made in heaven. Like, that totally works out. Even death metal bands, core metal bands, that low B, that like bands like Korn kind of started that, but they were Fieldy from Korn, and gave it that low. I mean, I think he just tuned everything really low, and everything was so loose anyway. But that was the inspiration behind a lot of these bass players. getting the 5-string or 6-string, and then
I
only
think
using.
technology also, the
Yes.
audio range of equipment and recording also opened up that opportunity for the bass, the electric bass guitar, to go into the keyboard synth
Yes.
range. That was, it was just a progression of, the state of the times.
Oh, okay. We're now onto
What's
another
that?
instrument. What do you have there?
So I fell in love with that bass on such a level, and because I was doing other things musically besides Ice Age that required a 4-string or lent themselves more to it, I said, well, I just want to have the exact same bass. I got the exact same color,
Nice.
and it's also a Euro. It's a neck through,
Okay.
but it's a 4.
Okay.
And the one
hold it up to the frame. Hold it up to the screen. There we go.
Wow,
Nice,
that's awesome.
nice. Is it bridge? Is it bridge the exact same bridge, but besides being a 5, same setup?
The difference is that by the time I got this bass, they were making lefty bridges.
Okay.
So the set screw did not have to be custom added. They did it.
Oh wow! Congratulations.
Wow.
Good for you.
But what was frustrating about this bass early on was the electronics were never wired right. And it's one of those things where directionally, at least for me, I'm used to when I'm using my controls, everything off is clockwise and on is counter. Right, on my controls. But on the original electronics of this bass, they were righty. They were the opposite.
They weren't switched. The potentiometers were just popped in.
Wow.
And I was getting all of this buzz and noise that was happening. And John Birchie, the tech to the gods, tried everything in his power to rewire the original electronics, and they were just never right. They were never right. So one day I said, look, get rid of everything. Let's put new electronics in this bass. Let's start all over. So now the Aguilar electronics that are in this bass.
Wow.
I was scared. I was scared because I'm an EMG guy from right?
Okay.
The only active electronics I've ever used in my life were EMG, and I was afraid, what if this bass loses some of its magic without EMG? I was wrong.
Wow, good for you.
This thing, the tone, and something about the tone of the Spectre basses pre-Korg, it's magic.
That's true. Yeah, once they sold the Korg, they kind of changed everything.
Yeah, I'm kind of heartbroken about that because you take something that has such a mom and pop feel of the original Spectre design, and when it was just a small shop in Woodstock, and then when it becomes corporatized,
that's it. That's it. You literally ruin the essence of the instrument. You've gutted the soul of it once it becomes corporate in that sense. Yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of companies are doing that because otherwise they're not going to be able to sustain their business model. That's the depressing part about it.
It's
okay,
true.
And what's your next one?
So number 3, and I have 2 of these that I would call like off the wall from Sam Ash.
Okay.
Quite literally. So because of Jocko, once I started discovering Weather Report, through my teacher, and he introduced me to heavy weather, and he would have me. I had never listened to jazz or fusion at that point. I wasn't grasping it. It was just over my head in so many ways. And when he introduced me to Jocko, then I was like, well, someday I have to own a Fender jazz bass. I have to. Now, good luck finding an original Fender jazz bass, from say late 70s, early 60s.
Oh, they're tough, and you can find them. Just you're spending a lot of money for them.
It's a mortgage.
Yeah.
What I was told at the time was, for every 1,000 basses that get produced, they switch the machines and they make 12 lefties.
Wow.
12 out of 1,000.
Wow.
Now, I got super lucky because in the mid 90s, they did a reissue of the 62 Fender Jazz
Okay.
with that classic configuration of controls and pick guard. So I have a Sunburst one, and then I've got this one. And these were not expensive basses, right? Like these are,
well, considering no, they weren't.
this is made in Japan.
Oh, wow.
But let me tell you something. I love these basses. I love this bass. It's just so much fun to play. It sounds so great, and I mean the neck. It's interesting too because the necks. They're both a Fender Jazz 62 reissue, and for some reason, this neck feels like a boat oar to me. The neck on the other one feels skinnier. And I'm sure there's probably not a big difference, but it's just the little nuances that are different.
A lot of it's in the finishing.
It is in the finishing.
In the assembly that they may take more material off depending upon, the character of the instrument.
Yep. I played one of those. Look, we all want to get a made in the USA Fender Jazz, but I played a couple of Japanese ones and a couple of Mexican ones. Man, they were smoking.
Yeah, they were.
And I didn't. Maybe it's just my sense of patriotism. I didn't want to have to admit it. That was the hard part. It was like, I don't want to like these instruments, but I love them.
Yeah. And then there's is there ever the bass that got away that you had and it's no longer in your possession?
There's one that more of a novelty. So, do you remember when Hohner licensed the Steinberger bridge?
Yes.
Oh,
absolutely.
yeah.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So I had one of those Steinberger-ish Hohner basses that's got no headstock, and it was, again, I was trying to be Geddy Lee, so that means the keyboard stand that he had in the music video for Lock and Key from Hold Your Fire. I'm like, well, I'm getting that keyboard stand.
What a record.
Okay? And then because I saw him in the Distant Early Warning music video with the Steinberger bass, I'm like, I have to have that.
1001. Yep.
Yeah.
Now I'm 6'2", and I look ridiculous holding that bass on stage.
Yeah.
Also, I'm very big about resting my thumb on the bridge pickup, right?
Okay. I hear you.
I mean, tonally, there are times where I want to get warmer and I'll not rest it anywhere. Or when I became a 5-string guy, and this is something that I didn't really plan on, but it just happened, I would find myself resting my thumb on the low B whenever I'd be working on the other 4 strings.
Wow. Okay.
On that Steinberger bass, there's nowhere to rest your thumb.
No.
There's nowhere to put it because there's such a tiny amount of real estate on those pickups to rest. And so, but what was amazing about that bass is with those double ball end strings and that bridge configuration, you could throw that thing across the room and it would not be out of tune. That thing stayed in tune no matter what. Incredible.
Yep. I used to have one of those Steinbergers. I'll be honest with you. I hated the way it felt. I mean, it played nice because it's smaller. It's and I'm a jumper. I move around stage all the time. But I was like, man, it doesn't feel like a woman. Like the Fender shape is like that of a woman. You have the waist and you have just the curves. And the fact that everything was so flat, I was almost struggling with it all the time, and I just didn't like it. I just kind of like it sounded good, but I got to the point where I didn't enjoy playing it. It sounded good. I'm not sure how it looked visually because
it had a very bizarre weight distribution, and
it did.
And it was one of those things that you needed the attachment to play it sitting down.
It's
Yes.
true. Yeah, it had that little almost like a
Wing.
lever. Yeah.
Wing.
But you know, I was very mismatched at the time that I was trying to use it because I was getting into heavier music and I was playing in a melodic thrash band, and like tonally I could dial something in that fit that, you know, at like if you think about as a bass tone example reference point, what Greg Christian had on Practice What You Preach by Testament.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like that very active Dee Dee Verney, you know, very mid-rangey, brittle thing. So I was able to get that on that bass, but visually it just did not make sense.
Wow.
Having that bass and playing that kind of music, it just didn't work.
Speaking of that, I'm just going to jump in. You hopefully you're reading my mind. Amplification. Well, first strings.
Strings.
First strings. What are your preferences? Do you mix them up on your basses, or is there a go-to weight and feel in a brand?
Great question. And so I could tell you this. Coming up, it was Roto Sounds. I love the Roto Sounds. I'm a round wound guy through and through. I love the Roto Sounds, and obviously Billy Sheehan and Steve Harris were big influences. I got into those Dean Markley Blue Steels.
Okay.
But see, and I can break those on like one gig. Like when I was learning how to play, and before I understood dynamics, and you were talking, Anthony, you were talking about the idea of like digging in too much and not having dynamics. When I had no dynamics and I was just punk rock playing as hard as I could, I was breaking strings all the time. And those Blue Steels, I would break those like nothing.
Wow.
Eventually, DRs became my string of choice for a long, long time. Love those DR strings. I love the tone. I love how long they last.
They last a long time.
And
actually, if you look at my background, you'll see that I have
he's a neon guy.
Neon green strings to match my logo.
Love it.
Oh, by the way, I want to thank Greg. If you look closely, you'll see that I have a my custom logo, which is on my bass, which has a green snake.
My alter ego. I am a laser cutter, laser engraver of acrylics and wood, and I put my mind into the machine and created a custom pickguard with Anthony's brand photograph with a snake all over his face. And we'll post a picture of that also. They're always available if anybody wants one.
That's very cool.
Thank you. Yep. So so I definitely understand the DR thing. Amplification.
Well,
amplification.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm a 45 to 105 guy. That's
okay.
That's my 4-string, and for 5s, 130s.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Deep.
Amp wise, I spent most of my career GK and hardkey.
Okay.
GK head, hardkey cabinet.
Okay.
And I just always loved that combination.
Okay.
Now, my dream amp, which I got to play through when I was doing a tour with Ted Poley, I couldn't understand, like, see this little combo, and I go to pick it up, and it's so light, and I'm like, well, this is obviously a piece of trash. Like, this is not going to be good.
Wow.
This is not going to work. I was so wrong.
Really?
Mark Bass.
Okay.
Somebody from Italy. Their amps, the tone that they have and that they pack into such a small package is incredible. And I couldn't believe how light it was.
Wow.
Yeah, that's the new Class D.
Yep.
In my, I'm old school, so I used to have, the PV, or SVTs, where like you need two guys to carry, the cabinet. But where they've gone technology-wise, it's incredible.
Yeah, no, we
That's
all the players we talk to, we always ask, especially players from the 70s who started, how the amplification changed who they are and what they do, because back in the day there was nothing. It was basically, reverse engineered guitar amps, and they were just trying to get low end frequencies. But today with 5-string, 6-string, 7-string, that's out there. The
8,
amplification
12,
can really
10.
hit low frequency. Yeah, 12s, 10s,
Yep.
but like it's a sign of the times a lot when, that's why we always ask, about not just the bass, not just the strings, but the amplification. And, it's awesome. And thank you for sharing that with us. We appreciate it. All the insight, and everyone's got their own tweaks, and, while we all have a universal passion and we all have a universal commitment to making the greatest tones that we can, it's always enlightening to hear how no two players really follow the same path.
No, not at all.
The last thing I want to say, signal chain wise, is that the Tech 21 SansAmp DI has been my companion in the studio and on the stage at this point for 20 years.
Wow.
I'm not going to blurt it, but it's the second time we heard that this week.
That's right. That's right. Tech 21. All right, guys, we're coming to the end of our show, end of our interview. First and foremost, I want to thank you for being on with us. And our final question is, what advice would you give to an aspiring bass player?
My advice is listen to the other people that you're working with, whether it's your teacher or the other guys in your band. Keep an open mind, and if you're looking for inspiration, start with the first Led Zeppelin record. Man, John Paul Jones.
Yeah.
Wait. We have to do We're Not Worthy.
We Are Not Worthy.
John Paul Jones. Okay, awesome. So listen, have variety. Well, you forgot what I like about your particular thing. What you should have added is variety in genres, because your genres are pretty crazy.
If sometimes we speak for you when we have conversations, we have a conversation like our subject is there, but it doesn't matter whether they're there or not. We still have our own opinions. And what we're going to say about Doug is Doug's listened to everything. Doug has listened to everything, and doesn't matter the genre, the band. He's a dig-in guy who's really he's found the bright spots in a lot of corners of popular music. And I hope you agree with it.
Doug Odell from Ice Age, bass player. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much. It's always enlightening, and I always learn something that I put into my next gig.
And we hope to do this again.
And I just want to say I love the Case for Bass podcast. You guys have great chemistry, and keep it up.
Awesome. Thank you. We appreciate it.